a lot about WhiteSpace and learning a lot about how a really a wonderful person is going to share with us some really important work she's done that will help us all actually lead better lives and have a much more vibrant and creative and productive organization. Juliet?
Hello, stayers. You stayed. Hello. All right, so here's what I would like you to imagine. I'd like you to create a visual image in your mind of 2 or 3 of the primary goals of your company right now. So creating the most unbelievable experiential trade show, or having a room full of exhibitors thrilled after the show and ready to sign back up, or the most beautiful conference element with spectacular keynotes or sales, that whatever your goals are right now, I want you to create something visual in your mind and imagine them at the end of a long road. So now at the other end of the road is your team, is your wonderful, hardworking, incredible team. And I want you to also imagine them specifically. Imagine Don, imagine Sue, imagine Sarah, your actual team. If you can come in closer on the iMag, we'll have a more intimate session. So I want you to imagine them at the end of the other road, and they are ready to run toward these goals. They're going to do this for you. They're going to achieve. They're going to conquer. And they go, and they're off, and they begin running with great focus and energy and drive toward the goals that you have set for them. And now what I want you to imagine is I want you to imagine that interferences begin to hamper their progress. Vines grow up from the soil and begin to wrap around their ankles. And swarms of bees and sandstorms come in front of them, and they're swatting away the bees, and they're closing their eyes because of the sand. And boulders jump up in front of them, and now they're needing to hurtle toward. Would you not, at this point, do anything to liberate them from these distractions? Would you? You would. And all executives say, yes, amen, we would. And here's what's so fascinating is we don't. Because in the real world, these distractions and obstacles come in the form of a million unnecessary and low-value touch points that gobble your team's time, like emails and meetings and decks and reports and travel and fire drills and red tape. And these are the bees and the vines and the boulders and the sand. And we simply learn to tolerate it. In fact, 80% of senior executives will report that unnecessary activity and unnecessary information are hampering the effectiveness of their teams, but only 8% have programs in place to change it. Because we've become so darn used to it. And it is this casualness and complacency that is torpedoing some of the effectiveness, productivity, and engagement of organizations we see all around us. Now, we think that a lot of this may be because we are so viscerally uncomfortable with the opposite of this type of packed schedule, this type of frenzied activity. And so we want to explore that a little bit. I'm going to take you there through a little something personal. So I have 3 beautiful blue-eyed boys, and they were all born at the Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Beverly Hills, California. Beautiful, modern, upscale Cedars-Sinai, where natural childbirth just means no makeup. That one's true. That's the happiest ward on the face of the earth. There's no sweating, no screaming, just everybody on the drip, but with a mimosa. Happy, happy, happy. So we took the babies and we put them in the little teeny tiny car seats and we drove them home. They began to do amazing things. They began to walk and crawl and talk. And mine talked a lot. And they did something specifically called toddler looping, which is when a very young child grabs a single phrase. And then they say that phrase over and over and over and over and over until you die. Okay? And so I would be with my oldest, Jake, and he would be chattering through the bank, and then he'd be chattering through the supermarket. And then he would get in the car, and he would start to loop. And he would say, Mommy, red fire truck. 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 Mommy, red fire. And there was one day where I thought to myself, oh my gosh, this person talks every single second of the day, and if they ever take a single breath, they expect me to instantly respond. And then I had a profound aha moment, and it was such a big moment that I actually pulled the van over to the side of the road, and I thought the thought again. I thought, oh my gosh, this person talks every single second of the day. If they ever take a breath, they expect me to instantly respond. I thought, oh my gosh, that must be what my husband has felt like since the day we met. And so I drove home. I got my sweet husband, Lauren. I sat him down on the couch. I said, honey, I was driving with Jake, and he was doing the thing. And I thought, wow, that could be what you have felt like for some time now. And his eyes got misty, and he looked at the ceiling, and he said, thank you, Jesus. And we are Jewish, okay? So... Now, why is this so universally understood? Well, I will tell you why. It's because men more easily than women, when it is in the realm of conversation, tolerate the silence, the gaps, the interstitial time. But outside the realm of conversation, all of us now, men and women and workers and executives, are becoming less and less comfortable in the pause. In the moments of life and at work, that we remain unfilled purposefully and ready for what may come. Purposeful, open moments in the ready stance are not what we're about anymore. And this is because we've become so used to this seamlessly connected, screen-addicted, frenetic, caffeine-driven activity that we don't know what to do with ourselves if we were to take a pause. Now, does anybody know what this is? Fidgets Spinner, right? Now, that's fabulous. That's so many of you know that. This is the #1 hobby toy for adults and children, this little thing that you spin. Now, why is this so amazingly fascinating to me is because the purpose of this device is if there should be an accidental moment on this earth where you have nothing to do for a second, you can spin it away, spin it away, spin it away, spin it away. We are so uncomfortable. And my little Chinese bad English packaging will tell me the various circumstances in which I can use my fidget spinner. I can use it at class, home, work. I can use it when busy. I can use it when boring or busy but lazy, my last category here. We can't stand it. We can't stand a single moment. So what does this translate into at work, this visceral discomfort about the pause, is we create work systems and processes that value exertion as a new fuel source instead of thoughtfulness. And it's costing U.S. businesses about $320 billion a year in the affect on our talent from this way of working. So that number comes from absenteeism. It comes from presenteeism, which is a hilarious one, which is when you're there, but you're not there, presenteeism. Missed creative opportunity, overload-related turnover. But even if we didn't have all of these numbers behind us, it would still be a giant problem. Because in any industry, in any company, small or large, when talented people don't have time to think, the business will suffer. And I'm going to challenge you sitting in your seats at the end of a long day to try to really remember, when is the last time that you caught somebody thinking where you work? And what would you do in real life if you came around the corner and you just found them just... Would you call a paramedic? Would you alert the media? Would you tweet it? We don't have a relationship anymore with the posture of thoughtfulness, even though thinking is what changes everything. Now, I can see that a lot of the people in this room are about my age. Many of us remember a time when we would walk into the boss's office and we would catch them with feet up on the chair looking out the window at a river. And we would freeze like we saw a rattlesnake, and we would back up because we knew that was the golden hour of the entire day, that thoughtful, introspective, rich, creative time. We just now have no values system for it. And sadly, our young people and our millennials and our up-and-comings are not being taught the value of that inner and mental exploration, and this is part of what's missing. And there is a cost. And I want to talk to you about the costs because, according to that research I mentioned to you, 92% of your companies are just taking the pain. I'm going to assume almost all of you are too busy, but we know that only 8% are trying to change it. So 92% of you you're too busy to become less busy, and you're tough, and you're just going to take the pain. And this is where I want to take you lovingly by the shoulders and try to raise awareness by looking at cost. So we're going to look at top line cost, bottom line cost, and the other line of cost. Top line cost has to do with what I talked about in that little preview moment where we talked about great ideas. Your companies likely have mission statements or posters on the wall that talk about innovation. And maybe if I came and I visited your company, there would be a poster on the wall that says innovate with a great question mark, with a great exclamation point. And then underneath that poster would be sweating human beings running by with a Larabar instead of lunch, running from, and when on gosh green earth would they have time to innovate? When would they have the distance or ability to step back from work to allow these great ideas to grace us with their presence? And this is the creative hit that we take from busyness, and maybe this is why creativity scores for both adults and children have been going steadily down for 18 years, because the subtlety of how you follow a charming thought to its fruition is not something you can do while you're multitasking. And so in terms of your top line, the differentiators, the things that will lift you and your company up above, we must have time to be thoughtful, and when we don't, there is a top line cost. Then I want to talk about the bottom line cost. And I think this is probably right now the most fascinating area of exploration that we're in, because we've looked through all the research to try to find who's out there quantifying all of this stupid, unnecessary, low-value junk. And the answer is almost nobody. And I'll tell you why it is. If anybody would tell me, any of you have a background in sometime in your career in manufacturing? Anybody ever been in manufacturing? Just a handful, just a couple. So you're going to know how this works. There's two kinds of places you could work: a thing factory or a thought factory. In a thing factory, things make things, and in a thought factory, you make ideas and connections and interpersonal relationships. So over here in the world of thing factories, they know that when they have anything that they would call waste, they have a very specific relationship with that waste. So here's how it works. Let's say we have a shoelace factory, okay? And we're cutting our shoelaces, and every time we cut our shoelaces, we notice that a little teeny tiny piece of shoelace lace gets left on the floor after the cut. The minute that someone notices that, what happens is they blow a whistle, red lights start to flash, and the music starts dun, 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 dun. And then the Lean and Six Sigma consultants descend from the ceiling on the Mission Impossible ropes, right? And they attack the waste, and then they quantify the savings, and then they brag about it all year long. And that is the relationship to waste in the world of manufacturing. But over here, where most of us work in the world of thought factories, where our job is to simply have ideas or be creative or be designers or be interpersonal or connect through sales, we have all of this waste that I keep talking about: emails and meetings and decks and reports and travel and fire drills and red tape. But what we've been taught to do is to be very casual about it and to say, well, you know what? Work kind of sucks these days, and it's hard, but I'm used to it. I spoke to somebody in the break who said that they work 6 days a week till 10 p.m. for their association, and sometimes the 7th. That's insane. But we've been slowly cooked like the frog in the pot, busier and busier and more 24/7 connectivity, until we just think, boy, it's a good thing I'm so tough. And then we go on every airplane, 10 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock, it doesn't matter what time of day it is, grown-ups napping in the day, because we're just so fried. And we don't actually look at the cost over here. And so what we do is, in a lot of early client conversations, is we will talk about cost. And so what we did to prepare for today is we chose a DC-based association, 35 people, and we helped them look at some of the cost of busyness for their organization. Now, we're going to leave them anonymous because people feel funny about this kind of data. I wanted to tell you, by the way, that their data are incredibly average, absolutely dead average. But here's what we did, and we only looked at cost in a couple of tiny little areas. So if we could have that Acme slide. So we're going to call the company the Acme Company. We're going to leave them a little privacy. And we asked them, in this particular case, only 2 questions. We didn't quantify every touch point of waste. We asked them 2 questions. We said, would you please estimate the number of hours in a typical, 3 questions. Please estimate the number of hours in a typical work day that you spend in the following categories. In meetings, they said 2.7 hours. a little lower than average, and email they said 4.16 hours, a little higher than average. And then we said, quite simply, of the time that you spend in the meetings, could you please let us know what percentage is unnecessary? And we defined unnecessary as any time that you are neither benefiting nor contributing to that meeting. And they said 35% of the time. We asked them, of your emails, please estimate the percentage of your email time that is spent on CC or FYI threads. Now, remember, this also reply to all is usually in here. Remember, this does not include the phenomenal waste of quote-unquote regular email, overwritten email, stupid email. We're just talking in this case about CC FYI. 35% of their email time. And then we do the math. This is such simple math. You can come up to me afterwards. I can give you the formulas. If you have at least 100 people on your team, we can do this for you. We do it for free. We love helping people do this quantification. All we do is we take the amount of money that your people make, the amount of hours that they make, and we just do the math of what the time value is, and here's what we come up with. For this company, for just these two factors, the wasted email and the wasted meetings, $27,000 annually. So now that means for this business unit of 35 people, we're looking at just under $1 million a year in waste. And it may turn out to be an interesting thought exercise because it's just not one that you tend to do. Now, we have 2 polling questions just for fun, just to see where you guys fall. Could you take out your magical keypad, please? So the first question, can we have the first polling question? How many hours are you per day in face-to-face and telephone meetings? Less than an hour, 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6, or more than 6 hours a day. And now I will provide what's been missing all morning. Do, 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 da, 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 da. Okay, let's see. Okay, 2 to 4 hours, the wild winner there with 24% of people in 4 to 6 hours. Now, I will guarantee you, you make a heck of a lot per hour than the people that were in that study, so that's interesting. Now, before we flip to the next one, don't go yet. I'm about to ask you the question of unnecessary, but remember, you're going to define unnecessary as you're neither contributing nor benefiting to the meeting. You can also factor in lost time from starting late or going on tangents. Okay, let's flip to the next one. So this, really take a minute here. You don't have to do this. Can they do it slower? I think they can. Do you have 10 whole seconds? What percentage, really think about it, of the time you spend in meetings would you say is unnecessary? Less than 10%, 10 to 20, 21 to 40, or 41 to 50, or more than 50% of your time. And the drum roll, please. 10 to 20%. And a big follow-up on 21. We have 4% of people, more than 50% of your time. Now, here's how I want to analyze this for you. If we can go to that, just the next logo slide, the blank slide, or back to my slide. What I was told in preparation for today is I had to be prepared that you're very senior folks, so you may not personally feel like you have this lack of thoughtfulness, busyness problem. It's possible that you have been around so long that you have evolved with your skill sets and your mindset to the point where you do not feel overloaded. You have an EA, you have 25 years of personal development skills, you've got this down, and that may be the case for some of you. It may not be the case for all of you, but regardless of which side you fall on, I want you to remember 2 things. I want you to remember that if we did the math at your salaries for these numbers, it would be terrible. It would be terrible numbers, and you're the ones often in control, so let's start there. And I also want you to remember that your direct reports do not have what you have. They do not have the EA. They do not have the acumen. They do not have the piles and piles of skills that you have, and they are drowning. They are drowning. And so we want to start quickly now changing this conversation a little bit too. I think we've amplified your awareness enough. Now let's start talking about solution. So the solution is not only to move away from unnecessary busy work, because moving away from anything has limited motivation. You can have pain push you, but you better have a vision pulling you on the other side, or it will only push you so far. And the vision that we like to share with people is this idea of a white space culture. So what is a white space culture? It is a place where the pace and cadence of work have a different feeling, where there is time and respect around the activity to be thoughtful, where people can connect deeply with family in their off times, take guilt-free vacations, learn how to disconnect so they can reconnect with vigor, and specifically where the pace and cadence is not draining talent. And that is what we're here today to talk to you about. We teach thousands and thousands of people a methodology to create this as a reality in their companies, and I'm going to give you today the sampler plate, the primer of how you can bring this home and do this too. So let's start with WhiteSpace. What is WhiteSpace? WhiteSpace is defined as a strategic pause taken between activities. Now, the name came 12 years ago, 14 years ago, from looking at the white spaces on a day planner and realizing that on the days where there was more of this literal white space, that everything was different. That there was oxygen to fuel the fire of whatever was going on at work. And actually, if you took an MRI scan of your brain during this supposed pause, what you would actually see is not nothing. You would see amazing complex activity in the default neural network of your mind. You'd see activity that's linked to introspection and insight and memory and creativity, all in a moment, that moment, staring at the river that we have so undervalued at this point. Now, if you're busy people, which I'm guessing you are, there's a sense of an ugh at this point in the presentation, because now you're thinking, oh my God, now I have to get WhiteSpace? I already had to floss. I have to go to the gym. Now somehow I have to get WhiteSpace as my next exhausting assignment. But I want to let you know that it's actually not like that at all, because you and each one of your companies and associations, you already have all the WhiteSpace you need. It's just buried under junk. And if I can teach you a framework to decrapify your workflow, then the white space just pops up as a natural byproduct. It's already there. It's just buried under stuff. And so this is what we want to do right now, is we want to really go through how to do this. And I want to differentiate white space from a couple of other similar concepts so that you really know what we're talking about. White space is not meditation, mind wandering, or mindfulness, and I'm going to explain each of those to you by analogizing them to taking your dog for a walk in the park, okay? So meditation, some people think, well, this sounds a little bit like meditation. It's not. Meditation, anybody meditate here? Do we have meditators? A few. Attempted, well, I meditate from takeoff until the ding for electronics. That's my meditation time. So meditation is a disciplinary experience for your mind. And it means that when your mind wanders, as the mind will, that it is your job to return it to a point of focus. So this is a mantra, your breath, a candle, so the mind wanders off and you bring it back. This is like you're walking your dog in the park and, oh, he's wandering off, and you pull him on the leash and you go, heel, 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 come back, and he wanders off and you pull him, come back. That's meditation. Mind wandering. You might have heard about mind wandering in the news. This is when your mind slips away without your knowing it. And mind wandering can be associated with really fantastic kinds of outcome in terms of purposeful daydreaming. But the key thing that you want to remember is that it is non-volitional. You don't plan it. It's just, whoop, the dog is out of the leash. You didn't, whoop, whoop, he's gone, right? This is when you're working on a very important proposal and all of a sudden you're in a Groupon for Caribbean food. How did you get there? We have no idea. We just, whoop, soup, you're out, right, you're out of leash. Then there's mindfulness, and mindfulness aligns gorgeously with white space, but it's very different. Mindfulness also has a disciplinary feeling. It's taking all of your senses and all of your energy and directing them on the thing before you. The flavor, the sense, the person, the conversation. This is the dog walking and he's feeling the grass beneath his feet and he's smelling the hot pretzel cart. Mindfulness, you're right in the moment. So what the heck is white space? Well, white space is when you take the leash off the dog and you hit him on the butt and you say, go. It is a freedom experience for your mind that you never have permission to have anywhere else. Even when you're meditating, you're supposed to be doing something, coming back, coming back, coming back. Mindfulness, you're supposed to be coming back. Never do we have the time to allow our minds to go anywhere they feel. And this is where they end up taking all these critically fascinating turns into the extraordinary ideas that we ignore. And so these are the differentiators. And the other thing I want you to understand is that white space is not traditionally taken in giant sips. It's taken in little sips. Now, George Shultz, who was Secretary of State to Ronald Reagan, was very famous for taking something called the Shultz Hour. he would take a pad and a pen, and he would leave the White House, and he would sit in the garden, and he would tell his secretary to only contact him if 2 people rang the phone, his wife or the president. And he said that without this time to remove completely from the day-to-day and really get altitude on the needs of the job, there would have never been a way for him to be successful in his role. And we refer to the Schultz Hour a lot in WhiteSpace as the golden triumph of people who really, really, really take WhiteSpace seriously. But most of us don't use it that way. And I want to be very clear that when we're going to go and say, teach your people how to have WhiteSpace, we're not going to teach them to go take 15 minutes, 30 minutes. That's the luxury end. Here's how it really looks in real life. WhiteSpace is optimal when it is interlaced in little tiny sips through the day, creating oxygen in the system. So here's how it looks. You get out of the car, and the traffic has been awful, and your whole body is wrung up with tension, and you have a moment where you sit in the car for a single minute, 1 minute. And you just shift your focus to prepare for the day. And then you get into work, and you're working, and you're busy, and you're busy, and you're working, and maybe an email comes in, oh, you just lost a big deal. Or someone is speaking to you in a manner that is an affront for some reason, or something came across callous, and you're distracted. You take 30 seconds. You process that and you move on. Then maybe an idea strikes you around lunchtime, and something really, you think you're almost on the edge of some idea that would be really cool for your trade show, and you can't quite get it. So you go outside for 5 minutes of white space to allow that idea to germinate. And then you go to meetings and 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 meetings, and maybe instead of doing that, you create 3 to 7 minutes of white space in between so that you can digest the ideas of the past meeting and prepare for the ideas for the next meeting, come in prepared. This interstitial lacing is the manageable portion that real people in real companies who are not George Shultz can tolerate, and they create enormous, enormous impact on a population. 2 areas of impact: recuperative and constructive. Recuperative means your people are probably fried, and they sometimes just need a moment to go, right? And the constructive is the other side, the building, the thinking, the strategy, the pulling back, the introspection, the emotional intelligence, all the rich work that we don't have time to do. Now, the way that we're going to build white space is through a very, very simple plan. I'm going to teach you the 1-2 punch of white space, the thieves, and the questions. And I will tell you that if you learn the thieves and the questions, you could say goodbye to me today forever, and to some degree you would be armed from here on in to create white space for you and your team. So here we go. We wanted to do research to find out why people were so overloaded. So we did a lot of it, and we came up with 33 unique sources of pressure that are the reason that you are busy, that are the reason that you and your teams feel overloaded. And this moment of connection with you is so important to me to say, to take each and every one of you kind of metaphorically by the shoulders and remind you that this is not your fault, that this feeling at the end of the day where you have conquered a small country in a 12-hour period and you lie down and some voice still says that that is not enough, that is not your fault. It is the fault of a cascade of forces outside of you. And this slide is going to be a little bit too dense to really read, but I'm going to give you a way to text in later and get all the deck. All I want you to get a sense of is its motion and complexity. This is 33 different sources of pressure that each cascade to each other. Every one of the arrows represents research from one to the other. And this includes the economy, to the political environment, to your business pace and seasonality, to org culture and direct management behaviors and your behaviors, and a swirling, swirling storm of stuff that makes people too busy. And the sad part is nobody knows this, and they feel like they just should work harder. And they don't understand the forces at play. So what we did is we took all of these and we dissected them. You can stay on slides for a few minutes here because we've got a slide coming. We dissected all the 33, we grouped them together, and we said, what are the 4 main drivers? What are the 4 culprits that really make us so busy? And these we call the thieves of productivity. But before I tell you about them, I want to prepare you for a little counterintuitive moment, because the thieves are all assets. They're actually really great things that tend to run amok and overgrow their pots. So they might surprise you, but here are the thieves. The thieves of productivity are drive, excellence, information, and activity. But in the age of overload, amidst the tyranny of the urgent, what happens is drive becomes overdrive, and excellence becomes perfectionism, and information becomes information overload, and activity becomes downright frenzy. And one of the really seductive things about the thieves is that they lure us into this pace where we keep getting stimulation and little tiny wins, and we never ever have time for historic victories. They just keep us just on the surface. And so what you'll also find is that different people in the room will identify with different thieves. So for instance, many of you will be drive, you're senior executives, you run companies. Drive is you climb the high hill and then you climb the next hill and you have multiple strategic priorities and you're always pushing upward. That's drive. Excellence, I will go first and say that's me. I'm a die-hard perfectionist. And before I tell you about us, I will also, if in case there's my perfectionistic brethren out there, I will say, by the way, I love perfectionists. I love you, whoever you are out there, because you and me, we are responsible for so much excellence and beauty and dotted I's and crossed T's, and it's a beautiful thing. And the only problem in the whole picture is that we also tend to get a little bit too kind of, we get too sort of, too CDO, huh? Which is OCD with the letters alphabetized. We get too tight, right? We get too tight. And this is the problem of excellence overgrowing. I will tell you that I'm also married to a perfectionist, which is fun. My husband is a photographer. He has a sign on his wall that is a Brian Wilson quote. It says, "Beware the lollipop of mediocrity. Lick it once and you suck forever." And so as you can imagine, we're a great team. But this, and then information, those of you out there who love to go to the fire hose of data and spreadsheets and the internet, and just no amount of information is enough for you. And then we have activity, and some of your meeting planners are activity people, and they like to make a box, and then they check it. And then they make it, and they check it, and they make it, and they check it, and make it, and 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 check it. And this is just a pure cycle of joy that has nothing to do with producing anything at all. And so what can you do about the thieves? Well, the very first step here is to be able to create psychological distance between yourself and the thieves. And the way that we do that is naming them out loud in language. So when you can say to yourself, oh, I'm getting swept up in drive, I'm planning 17 strategic initiatives for my team in the same month. You can say, that's drive. That's the thief of drive. And as soon as you have language in your brain for that, you have now broken some of the power that that thief has over you. If you're making a document and you're autocorrect fighting with a bullet point like it's a rebellious teenager and you're taking 27 minutes because it won't line up the way that you say, there's the thief of excellence, and you recognize it and you give it language, and now you have distance over it. And this is step one. Okay, step two is to go to Disney World. Step two is to go to Disney World, or at least to a story about Disney World. Do you know Epcot Center? I'm sure you're all very aware of Epcot. So my darling walking buddy, George, used to go to Epcot every summer with his family. And this was a trip that was supposed to be fun, but he hated it because it was Dad and Mom, it was George and his sister, and it was Grandma who was not wheelchair dependent, but who was wheelchair enjoyant. Do you know that sort of middle range? You have it, and you get in, and then you get out, and then you get in. And so they would go, but you have to imagine this from the perspective of an 8-year-old boy. So to every year, to drive into the magical gates of Disney World, but instead of making the thrilling right turn to the sounds of roller coasters and the smell of cotton candy, every year you make a left to Denmark for culture and shopping. And he hated this ritual. He hated it. So they would go to China, and they would buy a big fluffy stuffed panda bear, and then they would go to Egypt, and they would eat a little kebab and look at the camels, and then they would go to Italy. And in Italy, the shopping was fabulous because they had the make-your-own gelato kit, and they had the Mona Lisa shot glasses, and there's a fake pope walking around blessing everybody and taking pictures. So Grandma's out of the wheelchair. Everybody's having a great time. Shopping. All the girls are buzzing. Daddy's having a Coke in the corner. And George is bored But he is, you know, he's 8-year-old boy bored. You know that he's, I'm so bored. I'm so bored. And at some point in this moment, he spies the empty wheelchair. And he doesn't do anything at first. He just kind of looks at it, and then he gingerly kind of tests, you know, just with the little butt on the edge. And then, if mothers of boys, we know this, then in 5 seconds he becomes the Evel Knievel of wheelchairs, right? And so now he's in it, and he's spinning, and he's kick flipping, and he starts going faster and faster toward the shop. Mother is exiting the shop. He spins, he slams her in the shins with those 2 metal footrests. Oh, yes. And this poor woman, she loses it. She loses it. She's got the panda in her hand, and she starts whacking him with the panda. She's saying, George, 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 and she's whacking him, George, 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 George. And slowly, all the people of Italy begin to become very aware of this woman who is wailing on a boy who appears to be in a wheelchair. And so George, like any red-blooded child being whooped by a panda bear, gets up and runs away. And then there is this pause. And then you could say it with me. The fake Pope says, "It's a miracle," right? Now, what is true about that story is that if you have an empty wheelchair in the presence of a bored 8-year-old boy, this is a space that is going to be filled, because some vacuums are undeniable. And this is also the case with your free time. With time to be thoughtful, with a little bit of white space, your free time in the presence of a thief, in the presence of the thieves, is a space that's gonna be filled, especially now that you have a smartphone. It's gonna be filled every single time, unless you learn a different strategy to interrupt that surrender. And the strategy that I'm going to teach you comes in the form of 4 questions that will help you stop the automatic surrender to the thieves. We'll go through them quickly, then I'll explain them, and then I'm going to give you a text app so you can text in and get all this stuff and you don't have to write stuff down. So here are the WhiteSpace simplification questions, the filters that can stop the thieves. Is there anything I can let go of? Where is good enough good enough? What do I truly need to know, and what deserves my attention? Now, you'll notice, if you're paying attention, that they map back to the thieves. So drive specifically needs to hear, is there anything I can let go of? Excellence needs to hear, where is good enough good enough? Information needs to hear, what do I truly need to know? And activity needs to hear, what deserves my attention? And I will tell you from the bottom of my heart that of all the different stuff we've ever written, this is the gold. If you take these questions and you put them on your wall, they will endlessly, nimbly change the way you work at an individual level, at a team level, because you could use them with a team, at the entire org level. Is there anything let go of? Maybe it's a market, maybe it's an entire show. They constantly push you in this beautiful, beautiful, reductive direction, and this is what we want. And to entice you into this thought process, I really want you to start imagining, what if you could get good at this? What if you could take 2 or 5 or 8 or 12% of your team's time and return it to them on a silver platter? What are the things that you would love them to have more time for? Customer empathy, research, face-to-face, relationship creating, innovation. This is what's possible here. Now, Harvard Business Review did a study. They found that thought workers typically spend about 41% of their time on low-value tasks. So these are obviously large numbers. They were surprising to us. And what this means is that we're all very used to this, and we're all very baked in our busyness. So we have to be extremely, extremely forceful when we look for areas where we can be reductive. So the question of, what is on your plate? Where can you outsource? Where can you trust vendors more? Where can you cut? Where can you snip? Where can you postpone? Where can you reduce? Where can you trade travel for wonderful virtual systems? Where can you stop reporting as often as you do? There's a million different things that we can talk about, but philosophically, what I want you to understand is there must be no stone unturned. because this time is so valuable. In fact, if you gained back only 2% of your team's time, it would be like giving them a free week every year, a 53rd week every year. If you got up to 8% of your team's time, it's like giving them a free month, a 13th month every year. And so this is where we're heading with this work. Now, I did tell you that you could text in and get this stuff, so if you would take out your phones, or I guess a confident speaker says take out your phones. What I mean is please continue to multitask with your phones. I'm going to just give you an app that you can text in. So you go up to the top of a text, and in the top, you type in 72,000. I should tell you what you're going to get. I'm going to give you a little gifty. Everyone who texts in, I'm going to send you the first module. It's a 3-part module in our digital learning system, and you can use it with all of your folks to start conversations about reductiveness or overload or busyness or anything that's helpful for you. So here's how you do that. 72,000, you're going to see a little dash that appears between the zeros at the top. Don't worry about the dash. And you text in the word space. 72,000, little dash, text in the word space. If you have an international phone carrier, this will not work. Just come bring me your business card afterwards. And then you're going to get back a little thing that says, will you say yes to my yes? And you have to say yes to the yes, or I can't send you any goodies. I did a charity event for symphony volunteers last week. It was about 500 retired symphony volunteers. This part took like an hour and a half. So, space 72,000, say yes to the yes, and it might take a little while with the Wi-Fi to get you stuff. Okay, and that'll give you the deck, and it'll give you the questions and the overload slide and all that good stuff. All right, so you can tell that I am pretty passionate about the application of this material at work. I'm sure you can, and that really is. Obviously, we like making companies more effective, and we like increasing their numbers and all that good stuff, but really we feel that there's enormous pain in the world that we are uniquely positioned to solve, and it's very fun work. But of all the things I care about there, I will also tell you that my deeper passion, if there is one, is taking 3 or 5 minutes to remind you to also bring the concept of white space home with you. And if I ever had to have this focus amplified for me, it came in St. Louis. I was speaking at a sales meeting, and a woman came up to me and she said, you know, I can't remember, trade show, sales meeting. She came up to me, she said, you know, when I was little, my daddy came to me and he said, let's go pack a picnic, and let's go get mama, and let's go for a good old-fashioned joyride in the country. And so they made ham and cheese sandwiches, pink lemonade. They got the little cookies with the pink on one side and the white on the other and the polka dots. And they said, Mama, come with us. And she said, oh, listen, I'm too busy, but you guys go. You have a marvelous time. And they did. They drove till the sun went down. They sang. They played. They had a marvelous time. And he died 2 days later. And she told me that her mother talked about that for the rest of her life. That I didn't take the ride. And somehow that story went into me, but I never told anybody about it for a really long time. And then months later, I was sitting at our kitchen table. My husband is in the backyard with our then 2-year-old and 4-year-old boys, and the babies are both naked. They each had their own hose, and they're washing the car. And I'm working away on my laptop at the kitchen table, and he sends me a text from the backyard into the kitchen that says, it's pretty cute out here if you have a second. And I texted back pretty fast, sorry, busy. And then that story came back, and it picked me up, and I fell over myself to get out there to make sure that I didn't miss. I knocked the chair over. I was so nervous. And it is my enormous privilege to be at a juncture in the content where I can also remind you to please, please take this home. To try as best you can to find little places where you can truly disconnect in evenings and weekends, to try as best you can to take a real unconnected vacation, to try as best you can to pass these messages on to children and grandchildren who live amongst you, who are busier than any Fortune 500 CEO that you have ever met. They are the reason that the Fidgets Spinner is making $87 billion, because they have no idea how to sit quietly and watch a bird, because they don't see value in that. They see value in motion. If you have little ones, anybody still have, who has under 10 years old kids in the, oh, a lot of littles. Oh, I have to talk about the littles, and there's a lot. So if you have little kids, I beg you to consider canceling some of their after-school activities. Now, I am not talking about the ones that you need for your coverage for work. And I'm talking specifically about the ones that they have no passion for and you're doing because you think it'll be good for them. And I promise you, after the session, you can meet me and I will give you my home phone number. And in 15 years, you can call me if anything bad ever happens because they can't play the flute and speak Japanese. I promise you. And what you do is you cancel some of this and then you take these previously overscheduled children and you push them out the back steps into the backyard. And you close the door. And then these overscheduled sweet ones will look back at you and they will say, what do I do out here? And then you just leave them there until they learn to play. And to do what we all did. I'm looking at, I have a lot of peers in the room to play, to make up stuff with nothing except for our minds and sticks and a tent. And this is maybe, again, that creativity connection. We believe so much in sharing this message with children. Now, another beautiful thing happens is when we're spreading the word of WhiteSpace, we slow down at home. Now, the grandparents are in the room. You got this down. When the grandbaby is right there, everything else stops. But we parents have a hard time. We have a hard time remembering that if we don't capture it, it's going to be gone in a blur of beauty before we can blink an eye. And so this is the reason for that beautiful. You get in the habit of beautiful unscheduled time at work. You can take that habit home with you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the tactical. I spent an awful lot of time on philosophy and mindset, and the reason that I kept you there so long is that you have to do work like this with mindset before skill set. And this is honestly where some of you companies that are trying, that 8% that are trying to conquer busyness, where you're failing is you're creating isolated interventions that have nothing to do with anything. And it's like planting a plant on cement. So we just had a conversation with we do a lot of corporate stuff as well as associations. So we had a conversation with Warner Brothers last week. They called us, they said, we are doing No Meeting Friday. And we're very excited about it. And they want to create a thing around, well, No Meeting Friday has no roots. It has no soil. It has no philosophy around it. It's just an isolated thing. And here's what's going to happen. They're going to do No Meeting Friday for 2 months. And they're going to do it because my boss said so, and they're going to hate it. And then on the 3rd month, people will start violating No Meeting Friday by calling and saying, I know it's No Meeting Friday, but could you just please take this one meeting? And then the 4th and 5th month, there'll be nothing left of No Meeting Friday except for the fact that everybody makes fun of No Meeting Friday on Fridays. And this is the death of the isolated intervention because there is no context. And that's why we spend so much time on philosophy and mindset. But I do want to give you some tactical. And the tactical area that we always want to talk about is email. Because this is where people are really, really dying. So we have to create a different relationship with the urgency and importance of our email. And it's extremely hard to do. I have one client who's incredibly good at this. He's a standout in the emotional distance that he can create with his inbox. And I asked him why he was so good at this. He works for GM, and he said, for a large auto manufacturer. And so he said, many, many years ago when he was starting out, they would get a communication envelope every Wednesday and every Friday, of course, pre-email, and it would be a big manila envelope with the little string that you tie like this, and it would be packed with all the stuff they need to know, the memos and the reports and the sales stuff and the numbers. And he was a young guy, and he's trying to figure it out, and so he's going through and he's starting to get really behind, because now it's Sunday and Monday, and he's still working on the Wednesday one, and then he's got to start on the Friday one, and so he went to a superstar in his team. He said, how do you deal with these folders? The guy said, come with me to the parking lot. And they went out to the parking lot of his car, and he popped the trunk, and he showed the contents of the trunk, which included a jack, a case of water, and 2 giant boxes full of unopened manila envelopes. He said, I write the date on it when it comes in, I throw it in the trunk, and if no one ever asks me about it, I throw it out about a month or 2 later. And this emotional distance, this casualness that mentor created for him never left my friend Jay. But most of us don't have it. Most of us feel tied to the inbox like an umbilical cord. And it's not only us, it has to do with the amazing things that science is finding out about our relationship with the box that email comes in, which is called the screen. So if we don't understand our relationship with the screen itself, we cannot have a nuanced skill-building session around email. So here's what we're finding out. You already know about the dopamine, right? Who knows? You know that when you touch a screen, well, you might not know, you're not nodding. Do you know that when you touch your screen, you get a little shot of dopamine injected into your bloodstream? Someone said to me about a month ago, does it come from the phone? No, not yet it doesn't come from the phone, okay? So dopamine is an internal chemical that's released at times of novelty. So when you check, even if it's bad, as long as it's new, boom, you get that little shot of dopamine, right? And so you check your screen and you get a little dopamine, and you check your screen and you're happier and higher all day long. And then some intelligent, sober part of you says, maybe I should not touch my email for a little while. And you put it aside. And then it just suddenly feels a little sad, and things get kind of gray. And that's the dopamine lull, and then you find some rationalization to go back to the screen. And this cycle of pure addiction is very, very important to understand. Now, fun other things that science is discovering. They are finding out that the mere presence of a screen on the table at a meeting or a meal makes the other person feel less positive toward us than if we cannot see the phone. You might just close that next gigantic sponsorship by putting a napkin over your cell phone at lunch, because its mere visual presence is so amazingly threatening. And I could go on and on and on. 53% of people would rather give up their sense of smell than their phone. On and on and on and on. So we have to understand that before we dovetail into email. Now, let's get into email. So if you ask people across any industry, because we work in finance, pharma, retail, food, CPG, doesn't matter, people are too busy. What eats up your white space? They say email and meetings as the number 1 and 2. But they will state a reason that we don't agree with for email. They will say it's the quantity of my email that is torturing me. And we would politely disagree. Here's what we think. We think that the biggest problem of your email really is that we have all co-created as a community, and now we can't seem to escape the presumption of real-time response. And that is the problem, because it's not how email was designed. Your email was designed to be asynchronous. That was kind of the whole point, which is I send a volley to Dan, and then Dan takes his darn time, and when he's ready, he sends a volley back to me. That was sort of the whole point. And as we went along, we were doing fine, and then some caffeinated hotshot thought, oh no, it would be more fun to turn email into a competitive sport by accelerating the response time. And we started going bing, 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 bing. We started turning it into ping pong instead of tennis. And then that was the reason that was the moment when it became conversational, where we all lost control. And so one of the most important single things that you can do with your team. Now remember, I gave you some nice modules that you can use to introduce these concepts to your team first, but after they've had a mindset exposure, then you want to start talking about tactical. The most important thing to do is have a real conversation about email response time and what your expectations are. Because you'll notice that when you have to say them out loud, it's a little bit hard to say 2 minutes is my expectation. But what is it really? Is it an hour? Is it 24 hours? What's your client external-facing expectation? What's your internal team? We have to start talking about that loud, because the ping-pong game is turning every industry in the world into a bunch of smart people sitting all day with a ping-pong paddle. And all we do is get points for whacking back the bowl as fast as humanly possible. Now again, I'll make that same caveat. Some of you are up and above that a bit. Some of you have an EA who screens for you. I want you to think of your direct reports, and down from there, and how they are drowning. So I'm going to give you a fun little tool that you can use with your team called the NYR codes. And this is a tactic that will have some roots, because you will have already given them a bit of a mindset conversation. Okay, so here are the codes. These are codes that go in the outbound subject line. I can't find my water. Here we go. These are codes that go in the outbound subject line of your email. Now, here's what's really critical. You can't use these codes with someone you haven't taught them to. So don't use the codes to a client, because the clients don't know the codes. They're not universal. But within your team, you can share these, and they're wonderful to differentiate between true time sensitivity and hallucinated time sensitivity, which is where most of us operate. So NYR, need your response. NYRT, need your response today. And you'll see that now we're adding a time frame. NYRQ, need your response quick. And this is the only one with a really pressured expectation. This is like ASAP, but I find ASAP very, very much of an affront when I get it. It's too rough. But what you have to be careful not to cry wolf with this one, because what will happen really soon is every single thing will be NYRQ, ASAP, red flag, exclamation point, because you're doing the same thing that we're all doing, which is you're trying to bang through the busyness to create mental connection, and that's very hard to do. So be careful of that one. And then NYRNBD, I love this as an executive, especially as an executive who travels. So this is NYR, need your response, next business day. This says to your team, no, please do not get off the couch with your wife at 9:30 when you're finally cuddled up to answer a stupid email. Please do not put down your spatula on a Sunday afternoon in the middle of your barbecue to answer a stupid email. Next business day is fine. Now, when you use NYRNBD, the overt messaging will never be as powerful as the covert messaging, which is everybody knows we all gain points in corporate heaven for how fast we can answer emails on the weekend. So you have to actually, the trick of this one is people have to get in a little bit of trouble when they violate it. So when you email someone on a Saturday because you are in Japan and it works for you, and they write back in 5 seconds, you have to say, actually, I value so much that you're refueling and reconnecting with your family. I want to remind you that this is next business day is fine. And to enforce that is very important. So here are some things that we can play with. And now here's what we're going to do. We are going to do about 10 minutes of Q&A, 10 or 12 minutes. I know it's the end of a long day, but I want to remind, and then I'm going to close you with one story that is a promise to a friend. So in the Q&A, here's what I want to challenge you to do is to ask me the questions here that you're about to ask me in the hallway in 15 minutes. Because when you, it's so funny how everybody comes, can I just ask you a question? Yes, but we had 10 minutes of silent Q&A when I was beating people to talk. So what we want to do is we want to share the things that are percolating in your mind, even if they're contrary or debate, because once you do that, then it benefits everybody in the room as opposed to just you and me sitting by the coffee. So let's do a little 10 or 12 minutes, and I'll kick you off with one last story, and then we'll go home.
Question back there.
So we all produce events and we give a lot of information out at our events. How could we incorporate this into one of our live events?
Oh, such a great question. Oh, such a great question. So I love to go to an event, and I won't tell you which one it was, but I was speaking for a very large industry event, and a year prior we said, let's build WhiteSpace into the agenda. We'll have times when people can just be wandering or thoughtful or appreciating the beautiful venue, and everyone said, that's such a great idea. And then, of course, the 11-month mark and the 7-month mark and the 6-month, more stuff got crammed in. There wasn't a second of WhiteSpace in that entire 4 days. And so it's hard to do, I'll say up front. But if you can create a little bit of time, you may or may not want to call it you can bring me in to do the keynote, and then you can call it WhiteSpace. But if you don't, then they might not know that term, so you can use it as open time, flexible time, thinking time, digesting time. You're cramming their brains with stuff, they're overflowing. And so you want to give them some time to have it sit. And one of the things I like to say is if you've ever made a roast, you know that they say there's a very specific way to make a really good roast. You season it and you put on olive oil and thyme, and then you cook it, and then you take it out and you let it sit. And the reason that you let it sit, any cooks in the room? Richard says, to let the juices work their way in, right? And so this is what I always think of with the conference piece is all that stuff is just sitting on the surface, and there's no time for them to work its way in. You could do it in little areas. You could do it in geography. You could do it in schedule. There's all sorts of time to put that in. Another fabulous thought or assignment, although you have to apply this differently for every organization, is to strongly suggest that everybody who blocks time for the conference blocks an extra half day after the event for assimilation. Because what really happens, you got this big, beautiful binder. I didn't even have time to go through it. But what's going to happen is you're going to go, I love this binder. There's so much great stuff in it. It's really fabulous. And then as you hit the train or the plane, a part of your mind is going to be going, I wonder when I'm going to get to that binder. And you're going to throw it in the overhead compartment, and then you're going to be busy for 1.5 years. And you never have the time to sit around and really just let the juices work their way in. What's the one takeaway you want to apply? What's the one phone call you need to make? What made you uncomfortable in the content? These kind of digestive conversations are not had in conferences because the first day back, they have to deal with all the stuff from the 3 days that they were gone. And so a wonderful protocol is to coach them to put in your materials. We strongly suggest creating implementation time following the event and blocking it. If you're going to be gone for 4 days, you block 4.5. So those are a couple of ideas for you. Did that sort of get you where you needed to go?
Actually, years and
Yes.
years ago, I heard from, I think it was Outdoor Sports, the Emerald Show, Kenji Haruchian. He mentioned something called a Zen Room. And of course, all of us, tough, hardworking, hard-charging people laughed at him. But the Zen Room, and this was literally maybe 5 or 6 years ago, was a place where people could get away from the hustle and bustle and the sensory overload and just chill out. So let me ask all of you, how many, by a show of hands, in your live events have any type of Zen Room, a physical location where people can practice some WhiteSpace skills? Raise your hand. That's kind of what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, but let me just jump into that because I love it, but I want to take it in a careful direction, which is maybe it's just me being protective of the branding around this idea that's so dear to me. But once you say Zen, and I know you're just giving an example, but it's very interesting that that's why I do that whole thing for you about meditation and mindfulness, because once you say Zen and you connect it to the yoga kale people, now you have broken with the idea of business value in the thinking time. And 99% of the messaging that you want to share with audiences or with colleagues or with executives is that this is a business value add to have this thoughtful time. This increases, we talked about, top line, bottom line. So I just want to be cautious. I want to kind of play with you a little bit on the Zen thing because it can be a dangerous road once you make that turn.
And I'm not a big kale fan unless it's really chopped up and you don't tell me what it is. Another question? Okay, right here. Thank you.
Any suggestions for a polite way to decline meetings that we deem unnecessary?
Oh, good. Internal or external?
Not specified.
Stand up for 1 second, take the mic back, would you? So give me just an example of the thing that comes to your mind. Is it something that someone you work with at the same company is inviting you to, or not?
We got this question through the app, so
Oh,
whoever
through the
submitted
app.
it.
Oh, well, whoever you are, does that mean it's from the audience?
Yes.
Wow.
Using technology.
I was right here. You could have talked to me. I mean, I was right here. You didn't have to go through the app. Okay. So polite ways to decline meetings. So in a WhiteSpace company, when we WhiteSpacified a group, we have different protocols around meetings. So I'm going to tell you what those are. You won't be ready to use them, but just so you get some context. So in a WhiteSpace company, you have 4 possible responses to a meeting invite and not 2. You can opt in, you're going. You can opt out, you're not going. That's the hardest one. You can opt over, which means you're delegating, sending somebody else. Or you can be on call, which is like a doctor, which means you sit at your desk and you work hard through the whole meeting, and then for the 7 minutes that they actually need you, they call you and you ping in. So we have a different relationship to the yes-no thing to begin with, but to answer the question for whoever asked, it is incredibly important that you take a slow baby steps approach to opting out of unnecessary meetings, because no one in your culture knows any of this yet. And it would be, I would hate the idea of anybody getting in trouble or jeopardizing their impression or personal brand because they seem like they're shirking work for a concept that you haven't taught anybody else yet. But if you are a senior executive, I can tell you that very often you can say, I'm going to kick off this meeting for 10 minutes and then I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of blank. And that will give you 50 valuable minutes back in your day. I can tell you that you can have conversations about redundancy, which is a great place to start talking about, hey, I noticed that there's 2 people in the meeting who have a similar task or role. Would either one of us like to opt out of that meeting? That's a good way. You can talk in general ways about an opting out policy before you get into specifics. But in the early stages, you probably want to go to the meeting organizer in a 3-dimensional place. That means a face-to-face place where you can see emotion and body language and say, hey, I'm noticing that maybe I'm not going to be contributing or necessarily benefiting from sitting in this particular room at this particular time, and I'd like to opt out. If you opt out in the early stages, in the baby formative time of WhiteSpace through email, it's not going to be understood. It's going to be seen as you're shirking your duties. And those are a couple ideas for you on that. Yes.
Question back.
Oh, the back and then there.
Over there first. Oh.
Hi. I'm curious about the research you might have on the difference between traditional work environments and the flexible work from home environments as we have in our company, and to see if you think that there's specific differences in how people are being treated and treating their own time.
Great. And speaking of time, I'm looking at the time. I think we'll can the last story, and because we have so many questions, we'll let these questions go, because these are good questions. So both have advantages. So in the office, there is more of a sense of being included, and there's less of a psychological feeling of having to add work and add communications because people don't feel part of. Outside of the office, there's a much more nimble ability, meaning that you work outside of an office, there's a much more nimble ability to avoid the low-value crap. Because people who work at home listen to a conference call that's a sit-down meeting for everybody else, and they do it in an optimal way. They're on call, but nobody knows it. They just work away on mute, and then they hear their name, and they go, yo, and that's how they participate in the meeting. But remember, they've gained back all that time that they're not needed. And so there are benefits to both. I think in terms of creating white space, both environments need a permission-based philosophy that allows people to be thoughtful. Because people who work hard at work don't think of thoughtful time as a good use of their time. And people who work hard at home often feel very guilty if they take a moment to pause or reflect. And those are not research-based observations. Those are just working with a lot of different companies. But I would say that there are pros and cons to both, and time sucks that are different for both. There was somebody over here.
Okay, yes.
Thank you. Donna Shafali, again.
Hi.
Hello. Ironically enough, as you've noted, this is a very senior group, but event managers, the people that most of these people supervise or manage, they're rated number 5 by Forbes on the stress scale or the career cast. I mean, below military, below police, below airline pilots, I mean, and police even. So how, I guess, obviously there's a lot of stress. The best way to communicate white space, and you've kind of answered it, I guess, in listening to some of this, but communicating to your employees white space without saying, go out and play for a half hour, we have a lot of work to do, the meeting's next week, that type of deal. So what's a good communication way to let them know that this is okay to do, but in those small increments to help and improve their performance and productivity?
Right. So equanimity in this sense is a little bit like the stock market. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, it goes up. You're just hoping for it to be good in the long run. If it's the week before the show, you're going to be a maniac. Just surrender. It's going to be 16-hour days, and you're going to be crazy, and your feet are going to hurt. And so you don't want to create a false profile for a meeting planner to say the week before the show you're going to be taking your leisurely 20 minutes of white space sitting out on a bench with your lunch. That's probably not going to happen. But in a larger context, I can tell you that meeting planners are an audience I know very intimately after almost 20 years of keynoting at their conferences and their trade shows, and they have no permission around them anywhere to value their own thoughts. All they care about is the activity, 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 activity. And all that they are reinforced for is checking off those boxes. So again, what you have to do with, like we're working with Merits right now, which is also Experian, and they have full of meeting planners, and they've had to work very, very hard to go in on the philosophy and mindset piece first. And I can talk to you more about the tactical ways that you do that, because it's not one conversation, but to really understand that we have to step back from the way that we work and say, this isn't, not only is it crazy, not only is it not humane, but it's also just illogical. It's illogical to pay smart people to do stupid tasks all day long. And so we're working with your meeting planners to help pull data out of them and pull feedback out of them to say, tell us, what are the top 5 things that you touch that feel as if they're redundant, unnecessary, low value, a waste of your time. These can be data collection moments where you can start to get a sense of what that is for them. But remember to start from philosophy and mindset. Okay?
I think that will do it. You did a
Ta-da.
great job.
All right.
Ta-da! Thank you.
Guys, thank you very much.